Welcome back, second graders. Today is Thursday, May 7th, and we're going to jump into our math lesson. For this math lesson, you're going to need something to write with, ideally a pencil if you have it, and you're also going to need something to write on, so some sort of piece of paper. Now, today, what we are doing is we are going to be partitioning rectangles. And what I mean by partition is we are going to be dividing rectangles into rows, and we are also going to be practicing dividing rectangles into columns. So what you're going to need to do to set up your paper for your problem solving task, I'll zoom out so you can see, is you need to draw two rectangles. They don't have to be as large as mine, but they should be pretty big, because for the first rectangle, you need to split this rectangle into 5 equal columns. Underlining that word equal, that's super important. And for the second rectangle down here, you need to divide this rectangle into 5 equal rows. So your rectangle should be large enough so that you're able to do it. And if you do have a pencil, I would recommend using that because you might need to do some erasing. So you're going to go ahead and pause the video and make sure you follow the instructions for part A and for part B with 2 separate rectangles. Pause the video now. Okay, now hopefully you've had a chance to do the problem solving task. I'm actually looking right now to see if I happen to have a pencil. But as I'm doing that, one of the important things with this lesson is making sure that you understand remember, I should say, what a row is, and remember what a column is. Now, our rows go left to right, this way to this way, and our columns go top to bottom, up and down. So I unfortunately do not have a pencil, so I'm going to do my best work with a marker, which might mean that I have some mistakes. And you know what? That's okay, because what I just thought about doing... Nope, we're going to see it this way. Sorry about that. So part A for this first rectangle. I'm going to move this down and zoom in so that we can really see it. Part A is asking me to split this rectangle into 5 equal columns. So like we just talked about, columns mean up and down. Now, we had some practice dividing rectangles into fourths or 4 equal groups yesterday. And I know the strategy that I did for that is I drew a line in the middle going down, and then I had 2 equal parts, and then I drew another line going down. So I'm visualizing right now about the size that these columns need to be. It's not going to be perfect, but I think they need to be around this size. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice they're not entirely equal, and you know what? I don't really like this. So most of you at home are working with pencils, which is super important. So instead of using that paper, what I'm going to do is actually use this whiteboard that I have here. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my rectangle. Now, this is the same rectangle. It's not a perfect one. About right, which is fine. And now I'm going to take this rectangle and I'm going to partition it or split it into 5 equal columns. So let's take a look here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now when you look at this rectangle, something that I'm noticing is that this last section here is really bigger than the others. These 4 right here are about the same size, so I'm just going to do some erasing, which is the reason why I wanted you to do this with a pencil, because erasing is super helpful here. And I'm just going to change that so that they're about the same. Now you can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns. So I was just able to split this rectangle into 5 columns. Notice I only had to draw 4 lines to do that. When you're dividing a rectangle into a certain number of columns or a certain number of rows, the amount of lines that you need to draw is always one less than the number of equal parts you have. So I drew 4 lines, and that's because I needed 5 equal columns. So that's the rectangle for part A. Doing some erasing. I don't have my big eraser here, which is fine. These tops have small erasers on it. Now we're going to go to part B. Set up my rectangle. Again, not perfect. Yours probably look about the same, maybe even better. And now for this problem, what I need to do, it says to divide this rectangle into 5 equal rows. So rows go left to right. So instead of going from the top to bottom, I need to divide it going left to right. So because I have to do 5 equal rows, that means I need to draw 4 lines. Excuse me. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. My lines aren't the straightest, and that's okay. Yours might not be, but you can clearly see that for the most part, minus some like little angles here that we have, these are about the same size. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 equal rows. Awesome. So before we jump into the rest of this lesson today, one of the things I want to mention is in the directions for part A, it asks you to split the rectangle, and in the directions for part B, it asks you to divide the rectangle. And in the beginning, when I was introducing what we were doing today, I used the word partition. All of those are words that can mean the same thing when it comes to this math lesson. You can partition rectangles, split rectangles, divide rectangles. All that means is that you're drawing lines to separate the rectangle into a certain number of equal parts. So what I want you to do to get set up is to draw 3 rectangles on your paper. You might need to turn your page, which is totally fine, but draw 3 rectangles on your paper and label them 1, 2, and 3 so that we can go over our work. Awesome. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Go rectangle 1. Rectangle 2. And I'll do the third one at the end. So for this very first problem, I need us to partition the rectangle into 7 rows. So in our problem solving task, we partitioned the rectangle into 5 rows. And for this activity, we're partitioning into 7 rows. Now this is one that we're going to be doing together. Now, if I need to partition or split this rectangle into 7 rows, I'm thinking that my rows are going to be pretty small. And I know that if I'm partitioning it into 7 rows, that means that they need to be equal. So I'm going to take my marker, you're going to use your pencil, and we're going to kind of draw. Let's think here. If I'm visualizing this rectangle, I know that half would be right here in the middle. I'm going to draw like a little dotted line here to help us visualize it. And I know half of 7, well, 7's an odd number, so I wouldn't have I don't know exactly what half of 7 is, but I know half of 6 is 3. And so I'm going to have at least 3 sections here and 3 sections here and 1 extra. So I kind of have to visualize the size that these lines should be. So they're going to be kind of small. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, as straight as you can, 4, 5, and 6. They're not the best lines I've ever drawn before, but as you can see here, I have 1, and I should label it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sections that when I divided this rectangle. Awesome. The second one, I want you to, let me get the right problem out. Ooh, this one. I think you'll be able to handle this. Sometimes for whatever reason, I think even numbers are easier. I want you to divide the rectangle, I'm going to just abbreviate it, into 8 columns. So we're dividing the rectangle into 8 columns. We're going to do this one together too, so no need to pause the video. So if I'm dividing into 8 columns, that means I need to draw lines from the top to the bottom. I know that I need to draw 7 lines because I need 8 columns, which means 8 equal sections. Now, the thing about 8 is that I know 8 is an even number. And I know that 2 groups of 4 make 8. Just like when I draw a half, I know that I have 1, 2. And if I split this into halves on either side here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, if 8 just is 2 groups of 4, 4 plus 4, that means that I can draw a line to split each of these sections. And as you can see here, I have 8 equal columns. Dividing a shape into half, into fourths, into eighths even, so 8 equal parts, is a lot easier because you can divide the shape in half and then divide those parts in half again and then divide those 4 parts in half again. Awesome. The reason why we're doing this is because it's going to help you next year in 3rd grade when you start talking about something called fractions, and you're going to learn some really cool stuff about that. For this next problem, and I'm just going to erase really quick, this is the 3rd rectangle that you should have on your paper. And for this problem, I want you, oopsie, I'm going to zoom in here. I want you to go ahead and follow these directions. So it says to split this rectangle into 8 rows. Go ahead, pause the video now, and split this rectangle into 8 rows. All right, hopefully you were able to pause the video and you were successfully able to split this rectangle into 8 rows. Now again, when we were splitting the rectangle before into 8 columns, we talked about how we can keep dividing each section in half until we get 8 equal parts. So I'm actually going to show it here on the paper. The very first thing I'm going to do is divide this whole rectangle in half. 2 equal parts. Now I'm going to take each of those parts and divide them in half by drawing a line. Awesome, not the straightest line. And now I have 4 equal parts, relatively equal. Now I'm going to take each of these parts and divide them in half by drawing a line right in the middle of each part. So now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 rows. I partitioned or split or divided this rectangle into 8 rows. Awesome. So, like I said, this concept is really going to help you when you get into 3rd grade math and you start learning about fractions. But even more than that, it's going to help us for tomorrow's lesson. Because for today's lesson, we just divided rectangles in columns or into rows. Tomorrow, we're going to do both. And then we're going to be writing division number sentences that can represent it. So, right now is the time where you are going to do your exit ticket. Remember, it's attached to your seesaw activity. So make sure you follow the instructions on that exit ticket and your work is neat and clear. so that your teacher can see it and give you feedback. If you have any questions about partitioning rectangles into rows or into columns, please make sure you reach out to your teacher so that they can help you understand it better. Awesome. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you tomorrow with another math video.